In the first 30 seconds of this video, you will finally understand why. The Legend of Zelda timeline confused fans for decades how it secretly splits into multiple dark realities. Why? Link actually fails more times than he succeeds, and how the cheerful fantasy world hides one of the darkest stories Nintendo has ever created, because by the end of this video, you will never see Hyrule, Link, or even Zelda the same way again. The Legend of Zelda looks colorful, heroic, and almost fairy tale-like on the surface, but once you start connecting the games, symbols, and events, the entire franchise transforms into a surprisingly grim saga about endless war, repeating tragedies, broken timelines, and a hero who is constantly trapped in a cycle. He can never truly escape, no matter how many times he saves the world. The confusion begins because Nintendo did something unusual by creating games for decades without officially explaining how they fit together, which allowed fans to believe every game was a standalone adventure, when in reality, the developers were quietly planting clues, symbols, and repeated events that eventually formed one massive timeline that only became official years later, shocking everyone when it was finally revealed. At the heart of the Zelda timeline is a single catastrophic moment that changes everything, which is the point in Ocarina of Time where Link confronts Ganondorf, because depending on what happens next, the entire universe splits into different realities, meaning that one single hero creates multiple worlds simply by existing, failing, or succeeding, which is already far darker than most people realize. Paranoia and fear leading directly to the events of games like Twilight Princess, where the kingdom is still haunted by past mistakes that nobody even remembers clearly anymore. In another timeline, Link succeeds, but stays in the adult world, leaving behind a future where the hero disappears completely, forcing the gods themselves to intervene, which results in Hyrule being flooded entirely, drowning the kingdom and its people under an endless ocean, turning what looks like a colorful Salian adventure in the Wind Waker into the aftermath of a divine apocalypse. The darkest timeline, however, is the one where Link fails, because Nintendo officially confirmed that there is a reality where the hero loses to Ganondorf, allowing evil to spread unchecked, forcing generations of survivors to fight in a ruined world, which leads to the classic NES Zelda games that suddenly feel less like heroic beginnings and more like desperate last stands. What makes this even more disturbing is that Link is never the same person, meaning the hero is constantly reborn, trained, and sacrificed to repeat the same struggle over and over again, often without knowing what came before, which turns the legendary hero into a tragic figure trapped in a cosmic loop rather than a traditional savior. Ganondorf himself becomes more terrifying once the timeline is understood, because he is not just a villain who keeps coming back, but a manifestation of hatred that evolves with each timeline, sometimes becoming a cunning ruler, sometimes a raging beast, and sometimes an almost unstoppable force of nature adapting to each version of Hyrule, like a curse that can never be fully erased. Even Princess Zelda is far more complex than she appears, because she is not simply a damsel or a wise ruler, but a character who constantly manipulates time, fate, and reality itself, often making impossible decisions that sacrifice entire timelines to save others, which means her wisdom comes at the cost of unimaginable loss. The Master Sword, often portrayed as a symbol of hope, becomes a symbol of burden when viewed through the timeline, because it seals Link into destinies he never chooses, pulls him across eras against his will, and essentially turns him into a tool of balance, rather than a hero with freedom, which adds a subtle but powerful layer of tragedy to every adventure. One of the most unsettling details is that Hyrule never truly learns from its mistakes, because every timeline shows kingdoms rebuilding, forgetting the past, and repeating the same errors, suggesting that the cycle of destruction is inevitable, and that the legends themselves may be preventing true progress rather than inspiring it. Games like Majora's Mask become far more disturbing when placed within the timeline, because Link is not celebrating victory but dealing with trauma, grief, and loss, trapped in a world that is literally ending over and over again, which transforms the game into a psychological horror story disguised as a colorful side adventure. Skyward Sword reveals that this cycle was doomed from the very beginning, showing that the hatred that fuels Ganondorf was cursed into existence at the origin of the timeline itself, meaning every future conflict was guaranteed long before Link ever picked up a sword, turning the entire saga into a tragedy written by fate. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom take this concept even further by showing a Hyrule so distant from the original timeline that history itself has become myth, ruins cover the land, ancient technology lies abandoned, and the cycle continues with new forms of destruction, implying that no matter how much time passes, the curse never truly ends. What makes the Zelda timeline fascinating is that Nintendo never presents this darkness directly, instead hiding it behind bright colors, heroic music, and adventurous gameplay, which makes the realization hit even harder once everything is connected and understood, revealing that the Legend of Zelda is not about victory, but about When you finally step back and see the full timeline, it becomes clear that Zeldain is not a story about saving the world once, but about holding it together temporarily, buying time for future generations who will face the same fight again, which is why the timeline feels endless and heavy rather than triumphant. The brilliance of the franchise lies in how it allows players to experience these stories out of order, slowly uncovering the truth over years or decades, making the realization personal, shocking, and unforgettable because the darkness was always there, just waiting to be noticed. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Legend of Zelda timeline and want more videos breaking down the hidden stories, dark theories, and forgotten connections behind legendary games, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment sharing which Zelda game shaped your childhood the most. And share this video with a fellow fan, because your support keeps these legendary stories alive.